Welcome to the Bookman's Corner. I'm your host, Lois Lindstrom. We're excited to welcome back to our show author and journalist Ronald Kessler, who wrote the book The Richest Man in the World, the story of Adnan Khashoggi, which is the inside story of one of the world's preeminent arms dealers. We're happy to have you here, Ron.
Great to be with you, Lois.
Great. And you've been on our show 3 times before to discuss your books, The Secrets of the FBI, and the Trump White House Changing the Rules of the Game, and The First Family Detail, Secret Service Agents Reveal the Hidden Lives of the Presidents. Our guest today, Ronald Kessler, is the New York Times best-selling author of 21 nonfiction books. He was an investigative reporter for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and has won 18 journalism awards in his lifetime. He was selected as the Washingtonian of the Year by Washingtonian Magazine, and he was twice a guest on the Jon Stewart's TV program, The Daily Show. And my question is, why did you decide to write this?
Well, speaking of amazing, I was just amazed at the idea that this is the richest man in the world, or at least spends as if he's the richest man in the world, $300,000 a day.
That's what he spent, right?
Yeah, and had 12 homes throughout the world. He had 3 commercial-sized jet planes. He had the Nabila, a 252-foot yacht, which was used in the movie Never Say Never Again. And he was this preeminent arms dealer who made these deals between Saudi Arabia and the United States. So what was behind all this, and how did he do it? What was the deal? As an investigative reporter, I was curious. I like to go into secret worlds and secret subjects who are also important. And there had never been a book about Khashoggi, and I figured this is a good challenge, and I'm going to not only tell the story, but get his cooperation. And that, of course, was the really hard part of the job.
Well, I would tell you, this is a real page-turner, really interesting book. And also, in the middle of it, there are all these pictures of all these celebrities. It's really interesting. As you mentioned, he was able to make more money and more quickly than anyone in history. And you wrote this book in the mid-1980s, but it reads like it happened today. Have people like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos overtaken him now in the categories of colossal fortunes?
You really can't compare because Bezos and Gates have real assets, whereas Khashoggi really didn't. On the other hand, he spent as if he was the richest man in the world. He spent $300,000 a day. Now, where is that money going? It was all through arms deals. And, you know, his father was the physician to the king in Saudi Arabia, King Abdul Aziz. That's how it all started. Mm-hmm. But then he marshaled all his talents to become the richest man in the world in terms of spending.
And of course, and then the other thing is that, you know, he started out with nothing, and in 25 years parlays his connections to the Saudi royal family into this colossal fortune. So I guess it was because of his father being the physician to the king of Saudi Arabia. It was a big help to him, right?
That was certainly the beginning. But you know, Saudi Arabia way back was just sand. It had nomads who were Bedouin, illiterate people who would go from oasis to oasis. The only product was dates.
Dates.
And they had no concept of the rest of the world, you know. But at the same time, they felt they needed protection. They needed armaments. And, you know, they didn't think they could just call up Raytheon or Northrop and say, you know, we want to make a deal. That was beyond their ken. And it was Khashoggi who bridged that gap, who created deals between Saudi Arabia and the United States to the benefit of both countries. You know, in the case of the United States, we got this ally in the Middle East who was armed, and at the same time, Saudi Arabia was able to become a very wealthy
modern country yes,
and of course discovered oil.
And we're going to get to that because your first chapter describes the 50th birthday party of Adnan Khashoggi in Marbella, Spain, and you write it was the most coveted invitation since the coronation of King Louis XIV. And as you told me recently, you were there. Well, can you tell us about that incredible night?
You know, first of all, how did I get there? Well, I got there because on the one hand, I did the investigative work, reporting, getting information about Khashoggi. On the other hand, showing that I wanted to do a fair job, and that I was going to do the book regardless. And so eventually Bob Shaheen, Khashoggi's chief of staff, invited me to the 50th birthday party in Marbella, Spain, on the Costa del Sol. That's the Spanish Riviera. And Brooke Shields was there, and Sean Connery, and all these other stars.
A lot of movie stars were there, right?
Movie stars, the ambassador to Italy, Max Rabb, and it was just unbelievable.
Didn't they have exotic animals there as well?
They did, all kinds of crazy animals, wonderful buffets, wonderful dancing. I remember bumping asses with Brooke Shields on the dance floor. And my wife Pam and I, who's also a former Washington Post reporter, stayed there until 7 in the morning. They had these shuttle buses, and they put us up in the best hotels. Of course, in the end, I paid for that. But that was part of the deal. And then 2 weeks later, they invited us to a party on the Nabila, the 252-foot yacht. And I looked up, and there was my wife Pam talking with both of Khashoggi's wives, Soraya and Lamia. At that point, Soraya might have been divorced from him at that point, but they were all chatting.
Yes, we're going to ask about that. Now, I read at the back of your book that you interviewed 139 people with firsthand information for this book, as well as read thousands of documents related to Khashoggi's business deals, and that's a lot of work. So what did you enjoy most about writing this book?
Well, it has to be going to the parties, going as well to the Olympic Tower apartment that Khashoggi had in Manhattan. It was 2 full stories, two full floors with an Olympic-sized pool on one of the floors. We just had a wonderful time. But at the same time, I was able to tell the real story, which included his payoffs to the king. When he would make an arms deal, he would kick back a certain percentage to the king. And he would also pay off officials on the American side. He arranged call girls who were $2,000 a night at the time. Now, that's equal to about $5,000 a night now.
$5,000 a night call girl.
Call girls.
They must have been really beautiful.
And that helped make the deals. Yeah. And I interviewed the madam who provided the call girls with my wife Pam. She, the call girl, madam only spoke French. We were in Nice, but my wife Pam speaks fluent French. And so she translated and asked the questions. And with the madam was this gorgeous young lady. And later, Pam said, she was one of the call girls. So
no, surprise, surprise, right?
I can be very naive at times, but very exciting times.
Well, I love the detail you have in this book. You describe these women beautifully, and the settings, and how opulent it is. And it's just incredible, your detail. I want to know, what exactly did Khashoggi look like physically? And you did interview him for this book.
I interviewed Khashoggi on the dock side where the Nabila was docked in Porto Banús on the Costa del Sol. And that is part of his charm. He was this sort of very understated guy.
How tall was he? About 5'10"? Or
yeah,
about 5'10"?
Not too tall. These very luminous eyes, very non-threatening.
He had a handsome face, though.
Yeah. Handsome, charming, interested in me, asking questions. And that of course was part of his charm and his skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in negotiating, he would do real research on the person he's going to be negotiating with, but at the same time he would make it clear he could walk away very easily if they didn't make a deal. Just a real consummate negotiator and deal maker.
Oh, wow. Now, your book is a great history of Saudi Arabia. Can you tell our viewers in 90 seconds the history of Saudi Arabia since 1933?
Well, Saudi Arabia was, just sand back then.
Desert, just a huge desert.
Desert, right? And the Bedouin populated the area.
And there weren't that
there
many
was-
of them, right? It wasn't that population was low, right?
Yeah, very low population, but the king marshaled resources and created this kingdom. But it had nothing. It had dates and
Dates.
that's about it. So very primitive situation, and Khashoggi helped bring it into the modern age, to the point where now it's one of our strongest allies and
trading partners. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and certainly a thriving economy.
Yes. You describe Raytheon's executive, Glenn Grubb, and his mission to oversee the installation of the Black Hawk missile in Saudi Arabia. Raytheon had to build bases and teach 3,000 Saudis how to use the missile system. Tell us about Glenn Grubb, who was in charge of 750 Americans working in Saudi Arabia and their families. What were their challenges? Apparently, because the women couldn't go out without veils and without...
Oh yeah, it was a very
strict,
primitive country, and obviously Muslim, and Khashoggi would actually say prayers to Allah every single day. He was,
several times a day, right?
Several times a day.
Yeah.
He was a religious individual, which didn't seem to go with his payoffs to the king, but it was all part of the way he operated.
Now, when you wrote that when it came to defense contracts in Saudi Arabia, Khashoggi was the man to see. Now, how did Khashoggi profit substantially by trying to tie together two U.S. defense companies, Northrop and Lockheed Martin, to do business in Saudi Arabia?
Well, every time Khashoggi made a deal for arms, he would kick back a certain percentage to the king, and that was the secret to his success. And then he would spend it all, and that's why when he finally died in 2017 in London, he really didn't have
anything
many
left.
assets. No.
But he basically represented both Northrop and Lockheed Martin, correct?
Yeah, and other companies throughout the world.
Other defense companies throughout the world, right?
Right. Yeah.
It didn't matter, right?
No. He was the world's biggest arms dealer, and he operated in Asia. And
in terms of
Europe.
arms would be like tanks and missiles, and what else would be and guns and
airplanes. Yeah, for
just,
sure. I mean,
just
heavy duty stuff.
And he would sell lots of them to Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah, just huge deals, billions of dollars worth.
Billions of dollars worth. Wow.
And and both sides were grateful for what he did.
Now, describe the Khashoggi entourage of aides, associates, and glitterati who move on a wave generated by Robert Andrew Sheehan from Kenton, Ohio, who was Khashoggi's primary assistant. Tell us about Sheehan.
Bob Sheehan was sort of the circus leader. He would orchestrate everything, whether it was the party in Marbella or whether it was deciding who could have access to Khashoggi. So he was a very powerful figure, and he understood Khashoggi, and he understood how these deals work. He was very...
had he been trained in the military, or did he have a background? Or
no, just very smart.
Just very smart,
very savvy.
But he was also of Middle Eastern background, didn't he? Have a
Well,
maybe Syrian.
Actually, he was born in the U.S., but he had a Middle Eastern
connection,
family connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how did Khashoggi balance the aspirations of one member of the royal family against another while striving to make all happy, yet many of his relatives called him Fat Man?
Well, he knew how to deal with people, and
he didn't take homage to people criticizing his looks, right?
No. He's sort of just impervious to that sort of thing. Very focused and obviously very successful.
Now, in the mid-1970s, Khashoggi began hiring Harvard University MBAs and Princeton Phi Beta Kappas, and he had 140 employees and owned businesses in 38 countries. Did all of his employees make big money too?
No, his employees did not make a lot of money, and in the end, a lot of it fell apart. In the end, a lot of it was window dressing. So his deal was making connections between the arms dealers and the and the country of Saudi Arabia. But when it came to actually operating a business, he really wasn't very good at that.
Okay, now describe Khashoggi's billion-dollar development in Salt Lake City, Utah. I was amazed at the cooperation he received from the Mormon Church.
I got to interview, the chief individual in that area.
Salt Lake City?
Yeah, I got to interview the individual in charge in Salt Lake City of the Mormon Church. There was a party that Khashoggi gave there, and I went to that and was able to interview, all the people involved.
Well, you have great details about that. I guess you'll have to get the book to get all what happened there. But it was amazing all the money that was poured into Utah. And then you described that you mentioned a $1 billion development that Khashoggi tried to put together 1 mile from the Great Pyramids in Egypt, which had the blessing of the Egyptian president Anwar Sadat. What happened to that project?
That project also never went anywhere. A lot of it was his bravado. He would claim he's doing these projects and he would get local cooperation, but then in the end he wouldn't provide the funding, which is what happened with his claim that he was going to fund a sports center for American University and his name was going to be on it, but lo and behold, he didn't fulfill his promises.
Yeah. So anyway, that created a lot of press, didn't it, with what happened in Egypt? And then let's discuss Khashoggi's first wife, Soraya. She was originally a 19-year-old Brit named Sandra. And how did her life and name transform when she married Khashoggi? And how much money did she get from the divorce when she hired celebrity divorce attorney Marvin Mitchelson?
Soraya was something else, and eventually she had an affair with the grandson of Churchill. But she got a very good divorce settlement.
Billions, right?
Several $1 million.
$7 million.
Was pretty good in those days.
Yeah.
But she was someone that we interviewed in Spain after the party. She and his second wife, Lamia, were both chatting on the yacht at this party, and I looked up, and my wife Pam was talking to both of them.
So both wives were on the yacht with him.
Right.
What about when Senator Frank Church learned that Adnan Khashoggi was paid $106 million in 5 years for arms deals, and in 1975 no one had ever heard of paying bribes overseas? They were called foreign payments. How did Khashoggi make out in these investigations, and what was the congressional response to the payment of bribes made to foreign entities in business deals?
Khashoggi was investigated by the SEC.
Now, what does that stand for?
Khashoggi was investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Okay.
And at one point he was actually in jail, but in the end he got off. He was not prosecuted beyond that. So again,
How did he do that? He just sort of evaded?
It seems his magical touch.
He had good lawyers, I guess.
Yeah, and the laws were not that good at that point, and that's why Frank Church came in, and in the end, Congress passed laws prohibiting foreign payments, which were bribes. I think companies still try to get around that somehow, but that's one of the results of Khashoggi's activities, which is the laws prohibiting these bribes.
Yes. So it was a positive outcome for the country. Now, how did Khashoggi meet Lamia, his second wife?
Khashoggi met Lamia on the party circuit in Spain, with the European royalty.
And she's Italian, right?
She is, right. She is from Italy. She now lives in Florida. She never divorced Khashoggi, and she was gorgeous. And
she probably inherited a lot of money, right? Who knows?
I don't know.
You can't comment on that, right?
Yeah.
Now, what was the relationship between Khashoggi and President Nixon? Didn't he invest with President Nixon's friend Bibi Rebozo in Key Biscayne, Florida?
Yeah. Well, this was typical of Khashoggi. He would make these inroads with important people like the President of the United States, and
But there's a lot
invest.
in there. There's a chapter about what I mean, half
Yeah.
the chapter on him dealing with Nixon.
Yeah, and invest with Bibi Rebozo, who is Nixon's very closest friend.
Yes.
So typical of Khashoggi, and of course all this was impressive to people that Khashoggi wanted to do business with. That's the way he operated.
So he could just tell what. Yesterday I was talking to President Nixon about da da da, and people were very impressed.
That's right. Yeah.
Now you wrote in the book that Khashoggi tried to expand his bank holdings in California, but was met with a hate campaign against Arabs. He never got over it, and the incident soured him on investing in California. Can you fill us in on the details?
Khashoggi actually went to Chico State University in California, so he was very familiar with California.
And he had a home there too. I think he had a home there, in one of his 12 homes.
Okay. But you know, in the end, there was this hate campaign against Arabs, and so that turned off Khashoggi.
You wrote that in 1976, the Olympic Towers opened in New York City, and it was built by Aristotle Onassis. The building at 651 Fifth Avenue is one of the most exclusive residences in Manhattan. Describe the Khashoggi residence there. I think that's...
Well, the main feature was this
huge swimming pool, right?
Yeah, Olympic-sized swimming pool on one of the floors, on the second floor of his suite, and
it had, I guess, it must have had marvelous views of the city, right?
yeah, the views were incredible, and I was able to go there as well with my wife Pam.
Did you go swimming?
No. But, you know, Khashoggi got around. You know, he spent some time in Palm Beach and made contacts there, speaking of swimming. But he was a phenomenon.
And, of course, everything was so beautifully decorated. And, I mean, he only decorated with using the best decorators and furniture and paintings.
Yeah, of course, you know, he would supposedly have Picasso's on the yacht Nabila, which I saw, but in the end they were all fake.
They were?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, you wrote that in July 1984, Khashoggi's son Mohammed dated Brooke Shields, and later his daughter dated Khashoggi's nephew Dodi Fayed, the executive producer of the film Chariots of Fire. Dodi's father was Mohammed Al-Fayed, an owner of Harrods department store in London. Why do these names seem so familiar to Americans right now?
Well, when Diana was
Princess
killed,
Diana.
When Princess Diana was killed in the auto accident in France, she had been dating Fayed that very night, and so that's why it's familiar.
But so this is a very important family in a way, isn't it? I mean, they have their
tentacles all
over the world.
Yeah. and by the way, you know, even though Khashoggi cooperated with me on the book, and I was able to interview him and go to the parties, he also did not want me to write about his payoffs to the king or his use of call girls to get contracts. And at one point, they offered me $50,000, which they knew was the next portion of my book advance, to cut out anything about those two items. And of course, I did not go along with that. Actually recorded the conversation, but I remain friends with both Khashoggi and his chief of staff, Bob Shaheen.
Yes, very good, very good. And now, your book has so many famous names in it. Let's talk about Winston Churchill's grandson, Winston Churchill. Now, he was married with 2 daughters and had been elected to Parliament in England, and now his reputation was in tatters due to the last name of Khashoggi. Why?
He supposedly impregnated Soraya, and she had a child by him.
And did the press get wind of that?
The press went wild with this story. You know, the tabloids just had it every day.
And then this was during this was happening during like the early 1980s, the end of the 70s, and in the early 80s, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because this book came out in 1986. But I have a feeling it's going to resurge here, Ron, because it's so fascinating to read about these celebrities and during that period. It's like it was the go-go years.
You can imagine what it was like for me as an investigative reporter. I interviewed David Rockefeller, interviewed all kinds of people, but nothing like this. Nothing came close to going to this incredible birthday celebration in Spain, being on this yacht.
Just incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And being able to interview and get the facts, but at the same time remaining independent. That was the key and the challenge, and it worked.
Now, what about his children today? Are you in touch with his children today?
No, I'm not. No.
But they're around, right?
I'm in touch with Bob Shaheen. He remains a friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he's in Florida now, right?
Right.
That's right, Florida. And now, are you working on another book at the moment?
I'm not. I've written 21 books, ranging from FBI, CIA, Secret Service, and I do like to penetrate these secret organizations and secret figures, but it's becoming harder and harder to get the right subject. When I do, I will jump on the.
Good for you, because you are a fabulous writer. Now, I want to ask you, where can our viewers find your book to purchase it?
They can buy my book on Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com and major bookstores as well. My website is ronaldkessler.com.
Your name, yeah.
Which outlines my background and the books and some of my recent op-eds. So that keeps me pretty busy.
You're pretty busy. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you.
Oh, thank you for your great research and questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for watching. Please join us again next month for a new edition of the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom.